Okay, so good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this very special session that we have got today, which is called "The Truth About Menopausal Weight Gain" with Mel Wakeman. I wanted to kind of give you an idea of how I met Mel. Mel had just finished working at Birmingham University and had just launched her own business and has been supporting some of our members previously with help advice about nutrition, about healthy eating habits. But what I love about Mel is it's not about one diet fix. It's not about what's necessarily good in the moment at the time. I think it's all about the personalization of it. And I think Mel has supported and helped so many different people that I know of. And I just think she's an absolute fantastic human being. So it's a great pleasure to be able to introduce her today for this very special session. So welcome, Mel. It's so lovely to see you. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. It's such a pleasure to sort of talk about something that I'm very passionate about, knowing that so many women are feeling in a place where they're confused or feeling stuck. And I really pride myself on offering a safe, compassionate space without judgment and maybe giving you a slightly different perspective to give you a little shift in how we might be able to view things as we move through menopause transition. Just to apologize, I have two very loving dogs that now want to come and join me, but I've locked them out, so they'll give up in a minute, okay? So, as Dan said, when I first met him, I'd come out of a career. I was a senior lecturer in nutrition and applied physiology for many years. And I moved into the field of self-employed nutrition. And I guess it was quite generic. I've always had this kind of non-faddy approach to health and nutrition. I don't advocate particular diets, but over the last 5 years I've shifted more and more into working with women going through menopause transition. I'm 49 myself. I started my perimenopause journey when I was 44. So I think there's been a natural sort of gravitational sort of draw for women to come to me because I kind of get it. But also, I think to move into this space where we may well have challenges and difficulties regarding our relationship with food. And menopause is something that can ramp those things up. So I'm coming from a place of really sorry about the dog, coming from a place of professional experience here, but also personal experience because I had an eating disorder when I was younger and I've recovered, but I have experienced the challenges around poor body image and disordered eating and the challenges to my emotional and mental health. And I just want to reiterate here that these challenges that we women that we experience, they're irrespective of body size. Okay, so often we will make many assumptions that we might make around thinner bodies being healthier and happier, for example. It's absolutely not the case. So there's a piece around here around really being open to considering different people's experiences and perspectives. But because I'm going to talk about menopausal weight gain, I want to touch on some of the elements that I have not lived, because that's about being in a bigger body. And I'm very honest about I have thin privilege, which means that I was kind of born with a body. My genes say that I'm not going to be in a big body. But I have dedicated much of my life's work to understanding what it means for people to live in a bigger body, to be kind of excluded and discriminated against in society, because there are really strong connections between that and our health. So the way that I work is through non-diet nutrition. So it's about having a very neutral view of foods. So there is no good food and there's no bad food. We're not a better person for eating a certain type of food, and we're not a bad person for eating crap or junk or whatever we might call it. I help people kind of embrace a way in which they can give themselves permission to allow food into their life. And that helps to kind of overcome challenges around restriction and binge eating cycles and how we might change how we feel about ourselves based on the food choices that we might make. So yeah, I bring into that non-diet counselling approaches and also intuitive eating that may work for some individuals. So I know, in terms of I've met some of you, and I know from your work and from meeting with Daniel, life is kind of bonkers, isn't it? Life doesn't ever seem to quieten down, and just when you think it has, we kind of get another lemon thrown at us. It's really difficult, and I think still we're living in this time of uncertainty. When we went into the pandemic all those years ago, and we were all there thinking it's going to be a couple of weeks, and then it'll be like, 2022 will be okay. 2023, this is it now, and we're still kind of living in this turmoil where people haven't got a clue what they're doing, and feeling the weight of the world is very heavy. And you're likely spinning multiple plates. So I run my business. I have two very needy dogs and a needy husband and a 10-year-old. I'm in the sandwich years, so I'm caring for my child where I'm also the main carer for my mum and my in-laws. So there are always challenges where we're being pulled in different directions, not just with work and family, but wider things that are making demands on our mental space and on our energy. And it makes it very challenging when it comes to staying connected with our body and having some idea of a clue about what the hell's going on in our body during perimenopause, and being able to navigate everything that life is throwing us at the moment. And we live in this world where, we're kind of, I think it's kind of the label of achieving success, that kind of culture, the old style culture of we must work harder to achieve more, and the kind of the badges of honor that I'm sure we've all experienced or seen, where, sending emails late at night or working on a Sunday is kind of cool. And all these things that are in our lives push food aside. And hey, we're encouraged not to make food a priority. And I'm not saying anyone here does this, but kind of scheduling, meetings over lunchtime, and people thinking, well, this is more important. This job needs doing. We're firefighting. And of course, we get companies in the fast food industry that make it really easy for us to eat on a convenience-based diet. And again, I don't see there's anything wrong with that. But when the emphasis is don't eat, because almost like we're told it's almost bad to feel hungry. Like the diets that we see are, I've never felt hungry, you don't need to snack. And the idea that if we do eat, hey, it should be just the right amount, but for goodness sake, don't overeat, don't overindulge, because that's just greedy. So there are, again, very kind of judgy messages around food, which makes us feel sometimes very self-conscious, very self-aware, and doubting ourselves in terms of, well, is this acceptable? Is this the right thing? Can I do this? So many of us will opt out. And if you've ever experienced that time where you've got to 4 o'clock in the afternoon, you've realized, my God, I haven't even eaten today, or I haven't had lunch. And then you get home and you're kind of staring blindly at the cupboard doors, hoping something to jump out at you that would really conveniently make itself for you. But no, you've got to think of something to eat at the end of the working day. That's really hard. So we have an always on culture that disconnects us from our own body, because we are constantly being distracted, not just necessarily in terms of work duties, but I'm kind of addicted to my mobile phone at times. I honestly admit it. It's part of my ADHD thing. I get a lot of stimulation out of that, which helps me. But I've had to work really hard through these last 5 years of my perimenopause to step away from the chaos, because I kind of got caught up in the chaos. It's quite addictive. You get quite an adrenaline rush in that chaos. And so I've had to find ways in which I've hopefully been able to slow down a little bit. So we become disconnected from our body because we're always thinking of other things. We may well be looking at kind of external markers or guides for us in terms of those lists that eat this, not that, follow the diet plan. We're not listening to our body at all. So when we rely on, I don't know, let's just say MyFitnessPal and the next diet and the next celebrity, obviously don't listen to Gwyneth, but all these other celebrities and influencers that are out there saying, do this, this works, this is amazing. When we become disconnected from our body, we lose trust with ourselves. And when we lose trust with ourselves, then the idea of eating to meet our own needs becomes really difficult. And then you just chuck into menopause symptoms, which from my experience were more psychological, memory loss, brain fog, fatigue was really, really profound for me. So I spent about a year in denial. I was perimenopausal because I was 44, being told by doctors that it was too early and I still had my period. So I'm not menopausal. I mean, not wanting to get old because that was my preconceived idea about what menopause was. And it took me a long time to actually get the right help. But my business really suffered during that initial stage because when you're tired and you're knackered, the energy needed to complete work without reading it 5 times and not making mistakes is exhausting. So I really appreciate if you're going through menopause and you're finding it difficult. So we want to talk about, again, the stigma, the taboo that is weight gain. And it's something that many, many women will experience during perimenopause. And the area that I tend to look at on this is not just about health. And let's not assume that weight gain during perimenopause is correlated with reduced health. But I meet many women who are genuinely frightened of their future health risks because we're told all the time that weight gain is unhealthy. So in this talk, I'll talk to you about kind of shifting that perspective a bit. So I support women in helping with health concerns, but also when you're going through menopause transition and you haven't really got a clue what the hell's going on in your body, and there's 36, 40 plus symptoms of menopause now, and we're experiencing changes. And it's very classic that body shape will absolutely change and body size may well increase. And that's part of our identity. What we look like and the reflection that we see in the mirror, as that changes, we can absolutely lose ourselves. And what that means is that we can absolutely lose our confidence in the work that we do and our ability to parent, to be a daughter. And if that affects our confidence, then this is why we're seeing women leaving work, you know? So there is absolutely a shift in body shape, and I'll come back to that in just a moment. We see increases in body size in terms of body weight, and it's interesting because I look at the research and some of it is kind of like, well, this is just part of aging. And I get that men experience weight gain as well. So as we age, our metabolism can slow a little, our body becomes less efficient, we lose muscle mass at a faster rate. But I think there's some consensus that we kind of blame things on menopause. And a lot of the literature says, well, no, this is just aging. It isn't menopause, it isn't HRT. And there's almost like a real dismissal about it. Like, it's just suck it up, it's going to happen, so let's get on with it. But of course, we don't live in a world that's very accepting of that. So again, the challenges around physical shape change can be really, really, really significant. So yeah, there's like 3/4 of women will experience weight gain as a menopause symptom. And that is significant. And what a lot of the time that we're seeing is that we should be fighting that. We're told it is. And when the women come to me, they're coming to me as the heaviest that they've ever been. They feel disheartened, desperate, frustrated, like something is wrong with them, because all the messages out there are, well, let's fight the aging process. You can melt the meno belly. Follow this diet. Look at these photoshopped images of svelte vegan menopausal women that have obviously, I don't know, they're not real images that we are shown. And the idea of having cellulite or having a tummy that kind of spills over your trousers is something that seems as quite, to be honest, quite repulsive in our society. So many women are shamed into thinking that their body is broken and there's something wrong with it and we should fix it. And I have a real problem with that because there isn't anything fundamentally wrong with our body. So these are very normal, natural changes that are going through menopause transition. We are meant to change. There are biological reasons why our body shape changes, because as our hormone levels are dropping and we lose the capacity to reproduce and bear children, it changes the physical and biological makeup of our body. But we live in this very ageist society, and we live in a society that's very fat phobic. And this means that it becomes embarrassing. And again, this topic is swept under the carpet. And all the time we're given this solution, which is, well, you can change that. It's never too late to change your body. And it kind of is at times. I'm not saying we physically and aesthetically can't change our body, but the question that I then ask is, but at what cost? What cost to your physical and your mental health is it going to be for you to stay at that size that you feel most healthy and comfortable in? What's it going to cost in terms of thinking about food, self-deprecating thoughts, punishing your body to kind of shoehorn it into a shape and size that society says is acceptable? I'm not saying there's anything wrong with not wanting that. I spent a large chunk of my life kind of beating my body up, a completely unhealthy obsession with exercise, because that made me feel like I was in control of something. So when I was the thinnest in my life, I was the most unhealthiest and I was the most unhappy. But we're kind of shown these shiny, sensational pictures that if we change the shape of our body, we will then become happy. But our body image doesn't exist in our body. It exists in our mind. So anybody, whatever shape or size, can have poor body image. And society and our culture very much contributes to that difficulty in how we perceive ourselves. So I want to talk about why this menopausal weight gain happens and why it's particularly around our tummies. Okay, so yes, there are hormones involved. There are other reasons as well. And I think it's important to understand what, as part of this picture, what is going on in your body? Why is your shape changing? To give you that insight so that whether you feel that you want to kind of then tackle that and look at supporting your body in a different way, but also giving yourself some grace and maybe applying that compassionate lens that is, I don't think I want to fight my body through this. How can we shift the conversation to how can I work with my body as it's doing its utmost to take us through what is potentially a very difficult time? So yeah, we have shifts in metabolism. So as we lose muscle mass, our metabolic rate has a tendency to fall. So after the age of 40, we lose on average about 8% of our muscle mass per decade. So it's one of the things why we're seeing quite a lot about maybe resistance exercise, the importance of exercise to support the body going through menopause transition. It's also why we're hearing eat protein, have a good amount of protein in your diet, which is all good, but we need to find a level for ourselves individually where that feels okay and right. This isn't the case where because some is good, more is better. So again, I'll talk about respectful exercise and movement for our body and providing enough protein, but not thinking that you need to live on shakes and protein bars for the rest of your life. So what happens during this shift in metabolism is we go from a kind of classic pear shape where, and there's generalizations here, but for most women, we will carry fat around our hips, thighs, and our bum. And that is for reproductive purposes. We have a higher level of essential fat that supports our menstrual cycle and enables us, if we choose, to bear children. Now, when we lose the estrogen in our body, we start to deposit that body fat more centrally. It becomes a more kind of male type gender fat distribution pattern. Okay. So we stop depositing it around our peripherals, around our hips and thighs, and it goes towards our tummy. That's through the natural loss of estrogen. Now, we may well replace that with HRT, for example, maybe other components, but there's nothing we can fundamentally do to reverse that shift. So finding that your waistline is disappearing, or you're kind of getting thickening around the middle, and again, we hear things like stubborn belly fat. This is biology. So again, the idea that we're kind of meant to pummel this fat into submission, like this is your body. This is your body shifting its function and its role in life. So again, can we invite ourselves to think about our body beyond our appearance, which is hard. I know that. So we become more apple-shaped as opposed to pears. Now, other things that may have a role here is prior dieting history. Okay. Now, I typically work with women who have dieted for decades. Some of my clients, I think the youngest was put on a diet at 3 or 4. Others are kind of 8, 13. And it is that story, I'm not blaming here, where it's like mum goes to a slimming group and so they take their kid with them. It's kind of the gentle, come on, let's do something good. But what we tend to find with early dieters is that they're more likely to continue. And what happens with dieting is that it tends to fail in around 95% of cases. Okay. Nobody tells us this, but we pursue this intentional weight loss and we're kind of told it's simple. We just eat less and we exercise more. But when our body loses body weight, it kicks into play a kind of compensatory mechanism, because for our body's role in our life, it is here to keep us safe. Okay, it's here to look after us. And a lot of the responses and mechanisms of our body are based on very, very primitive ones. So when we kind of lose a certain percentage or a weight in body mass, our body kind of goes, hang on a minute, that's not really conducive to survival or staying well, is it? And this goes back thousands of years. So if we were in the time where we didn't have an emergency stash of biscuits in the drawer under the desk, and we were having to go and hunt our food that might take 3 or 4 days, if we lost weight, we're at risk of getting ill, not being able to look after our family, and being the prey of a predator. So when we lose weight, our body goes, okay, right, we better go and have something to eat then. So we lose weight and we get hunger hormones that are released, and it's kind of sends us on this journey to go and seek out something to eat. And often when we're essentially starving our body, whether intentionally or not, we'll get a kind of crave or a drive to go for high energy foods. So donkeys years ago, that might have been go and pick some berries, go and raid a bee's nest. Now it's get the peanut butter Kit Kat out of the drawer. Again, no shame. I have quite a thing for peanut butter Kit Kats. But we live in this society, in this world where everything's very, very accessible. It's really hard when you've got biological drivers going, eat that, else you're going to die. It's kind of basic as it gets. So we then kind of, we do this diet that it means we eat less and we move more, and we can't sustain it because it's usually not sustainable. It's often very restrictive and it's not functional. And we stop the diet, we just get bored, and our body goes, oh, thank God. So then we go back to eating the way that we did. And often there's a little bit of an overthrow, as it were. So we'll put the weight back on that we lost plus a little bit more. So we then go, oh, look, Tim Spector's got another one out. Let's go and see what Tim Spector's doing, because he's really cool. He's very knowledgeable, apparently. Or there's Michael Mosley, and there's other kind of celebrity and famous scientists that love to give out advice about how we should be shifting the pounds. And what happens, ironically, is that we gain weight over time. So diets cause weight gain. And what happens when our weight increases is that it can be stressful to the body, and it may well mean that we increase the fat deposition around our tummy. So again, quite a challenging one. Increased insulin sensitivity. So what happens here, when we lose estrogen and it slowly starts to come down, we lose the stabilizing effect that estrogen provides to our blood sugar levels. So the estrogen is a little bit like a calming effect on a pond, so that the boat just bobs along up and down. So our blood sugar levels will kind of go up and down in relation to our insulin sensitivity. So there's correlations here between insulin and blood sugar levels. So when we lose the estrogen, it's like we take away that calming effect. It's kind of like putting a wave machine on the pond. So our insulin sensitivity starts to fluctuate, and we become more sensitive to insulin, which can predispose us ultimately to insulin resistance. But it can also mean that our blood sugar levels can fluctuate more. So a little bit of sugar might cause a surge of insulin. So we might find that we get kind of big surges and then big troughs in terms of our blood sugar levels. And that can absolutely affect our food preferences, because when our energy levels are low and our blood sugar energy levels are low, then our body's thinking, quick, get some energy. And we're like, shit, haven't got time. Get the coffee, get the biscuits. We've got to go. We've got to get the next job done. And we kind of go into these kind of quick fix solutions, which again, I don't have a problem with. There's a place for these. Like, how do we function without them? But if we find that our blood sugar levels going up and down precipitate hot flushes, or make us kind of unpleasant to be around, or just make us more forgetful, have a negative impact on our sleep, for example, that makes menopause more challenging. So sometimes we have to explore maybe what might be working for our body. But the increased insulin sensitivity may mean that some people find that they don't tolerate carbohydrates so well. So I've met many women who said to me during perimenopause, I have never had a sweet tooth, but now if I open that packet of biscuits, it's gone. Or what is it about me and, Dairy Milk Marvelous Creations? I can't get that out of my head. And when I have something, I get this massive surge, and then I just kind of crash and I want to fall asleep. So it may be for certain individuals that you find maybe more of the sweeter, more simple sugars, I suppose, if we're thinking about chocolates and biscuits and that sort of stuff, aren't tolerated as well. Again, they can impact your mood and your menopause symptoms. Now, me saying that doesn't mean I'm now going to say, right, so we need to be cutting out those carbs. I am never going to say that. Okay, it may be there are certain types of carbohydrates that for individuals worsen some of your menopause symptoms. That doesn't give me a right to say cut them all out. And one of those reasons is because carbohydrates are really important for our body. They're really important for our brain and our gut. So I hold my hands up. I'm not a fan of keto diets. And there may be people kind of watching this, like it's worked brilliantly for them. They feel great on it. And that honestly is fine. But for many women, it isn't. And I'm probably one of the women that might throttle somebody if I didn't have carbohydrates in my diet. They make me very moody. I need to kind of be eating quite regularly, and I have a lot of carbohydrate in my diet because that's just helps my brain work. Now, when we eat carbohydrates, and we don't know, we'll talk about the different types in a minute, what happens is that we get a nice little serotonin release. We get a nice little dopamine hit. And they are our kind of natural, feel good, chill pills. Dopamine gives us that kind of sense of, yeah, it is a kind of reward hormone. It drives that sense of desire, but they're really important good mood hormones. And when we're going through menopause with challenges around our mental health, we kind of need sometimes all the pick-me-ups we can get. And the other factor is carbohydrates for gut health. Really, really important. We don't want to be starving our bacteria in our gut, because that has an impact on our mental health, on our wider immunity and well-being. So I am a bit of a carb fan for menopause as well. And the other factor is cortisol. It's our stress hormone. And I think we're thinking about life's pressures and everything that we're trying to do or feel that we are expected to do. And we may be overstretched in high pressure jobs. We may be struggling with brain fog and poor memory and worrying about health and finances. And that kind of chronic level of stress raises cortisol. Now, cortisol does two things. It increases our appetite, because this is our stress response again. This is our body going, right, okay, even though it's not like real imminent danger, the perception of threat through these stresses is like, right, okay, higher sugar foods again, high energy, because just in case we might need it. And it's one of the reasons why our brain may continue to whir as we try and go through all those different scenarios, so that whatever happens, we feel prepared. So cortisol makes us more hungry. And most of the receptors for cortisol sit around our tummy. So when they get activated, they increase fat deposition around our tummy. So what I see by our belly growing are clues. And there was a time where I would freak out about gaining weight in my thinner body, but gaining weight and that being really problematic for me. But shifting that in terms of, wow, body's changing. It's meant to change. What is this trying to tell me? Is there anything here that my body is trying to kind of communicate to me here? And it might be carbs for some types aren't your best friend, but it might be reflecting back on, actually, you know what, I need to manage my stress levels better. So often the solution isn't always food. So coming into this, no, we don't live in a world that makes it easy for some folk to exist in the body that they were given with, that they were born with, that doesn't conform to the thin, ideal, in inverted commas, expectations. Body image goals, body image ideals have been changing for centuries. I mean, it goes back to like mid-Greece, but I look at like the last 100 years and the way in which women are expected to conform to different and really far into the spectrum body ideals. Like, how the hell are we supposed to keep up with that? And maybe we could look at opting out. So what many women experience in bigger bodies, and this is through the research and the work that I do with my clients, is that there is a negative bias, a negative attitude, which suggests certain kind of toxic ideologies or stereotypical ways of looking at bigger bodies that may be around, well, they're out of control. They don't know, they don't care about their health, is one I hear a lot about. It's so simple. Fatness is a choice. None of those things. None of those things at all. But what happens when folk are exposed to these judgmental and stigmatizing attitudes and beliefs is that it causes harm. I'm just going to check where I am with that. It causes harm. There are negative health implications to being exposed to a weight bias and weight stigma and discrimination by our society, because we internalize those messages. And that's what essentially becomes internal weight bias and that has a negative impact on our physical and emotional health. So menopause is about age discrimination, it's about weight discrimination. And the really interesting thing is when you look at the way in which they try to classify and determine health is through the body mass index, which is an appalling tool that was never meant to assess individual health. It was never created from a medical source. For people that have a BMI of 25 to 30, which is considered the overweight category, those folk have the lowest mortality, the lowest risk of disease states compared to anybody. Yeah, that's the overweight category. That's bad, isn't it? And what we often see is a massive misassociation with health data that suggests that folk in bigger bodies are at high risk of type 2 diabetes, heart disease, certain types of cancer, and so on. The list goes on. And I kind of want to challenge that in just a second. So to kind of show you what can happen when we're exposed to these different sorts of scenarios. Okay, if we start here, feeling really uncomfortable in your body, maybe going through menopausal weight gain, experiencing judgment, shame, being looked at, comments, those sorts of things. Folk internalize that, hold that in, the idea that there's something wrong with your body. So we end up with guilt and shame. Now, that's a stress response. That's what raises cortisol. And it's that stress response, it's that harmful prejudice and exposure that increases levels of cortisol, contributes to high levels of blood pressure, contributes to more inflammation in the body, maybe rising blood sugar levels. They happen all independent of body weight and body weight change. But we're told those kind of changes, metabolic changes in the body, can lead to, diabetes, heart disease, and so on. There isn't enough evidence to blame the diseases that we associate with fatness on fatness. And that's kind of a bit of a mind. That's like, but that goes against everything that I've ever been told. It goes against what I read here and there. And yeah, it does. Because most of the literature and the evidence and the science that we have doesn't account for discrimination. It doesn't account for the fact that folk in bigger bodies don't have access to the same healthcare. They're not given the same options. And that has consequences and implications on health. So we're all told, well, it's your fault that you've got fatter, so you need to sort it out. And of course, experiencing all of that means that, well, how do I cope with that? Well, I'll probably stay indoors more. I'll probably become more isolated. Don't feel like exercising because I really don't like my body. And I'll probably eat. I'll probably use food to cope. Because many of us have used food to cope. And again, I don't find anything wrong with that at all. I think that's really clever that we can find food to give us comfort and safety and security. If that becomes problematic, then we can look at that with compassion, but not with judgment. So that's kind of my approach on that. And I think because of basically such a stressful time going through midlife, it's one of the reasons why women in midlife suffer with quite a high percentage of eating disorders. So we recognize in midlife, going through menopause, that women either develop a new kind of disordered relationship with food, or they may well develop an eating disorder, or one that they had when they were younger comes back. Because life is hard. So it's kind of giving ourselves permission to kind of maybe look at other factors which are going on here. I'm just going to skip over this one. So yeah, after that bombshell, it's like, okay, then let's come back to the food. And I'm conscious of time because I do talk a lot of the time. So let's talk about the food, because I know a lot of people do. let's like, there's nothing wrong with thinking, right, well, I want to improve my diet. I want to eat better because I know I feel better for doing that. Well, how do we work that out? How do we decide for ourselves what is our own personalized nutrition? And there isn't really a short way round to look at this. It's trial and error. Okay. So what we know from anecdotal evidence and the kind of research is that, yeah, some foods may well worsen symptoms. And the foods that may be triggering will be those that have a stimulant type effect. So the obvious ones that you may be aware of are things like caffeine, because it stimulates, and that can make your blood sugar levels fluctuate. It can cause hot flushes. It might make your bladder more sensitive. It might make you sweat more at night. Same with spicy foods. It raises your metabolism. So anything that kind of just gives your body a boost can sometimes amplify the symptoms that you're experiencing. Same with alcohol. Brings out hot flushes, contributes to night sweats or bladder problems. It may cause digestive problems. Sugar's another one. So it may worsen your symptoms. But if you're okay with sugar, then you don't have to eliminate it from your diet. And fiber I've added on here because the idea of kind of healthifying our diets and being, sometimes we can get almost too preoccupied with what a healthy diet looks like. And we may end up eating too many vegetables and too many whole grains. And what menopause can do is increase the sensitivity of our gut. And IBS symptoms can worsen, digestive problems can worsen because of the loss of estrogen. So sometimes too much fiber isn't great. So again, it's very, very individual. So foods that may well help will be adding in the things, this is probably the stuff that you already know. This isn't the stuff that's challenging, is it? It's implementing this and doing this. That's the difficult part. So foods that may help symptoms will be your healthy fats that you get in olive oil and avocados and your fish oils, and that may be a supplement because we know that they can almost substitute to a certain extent the estrogen that's going, because these healthy fats and the essential fats will support our cognitive function. They may well provide slight anti-inflammatory or lubrication effect on our joints. So if you're experiencing joint stiffness in the morning and mobility issues, they can be helpful. Fiber-rich foods, yeah. You have to go mad on them. We don't have to have 5 every day. I'm kind of rare for a nutritionist to say that. Like, if you're not managing to get 5 a day because you haven't got time or you can't afford it, that's stressful. That's not helpful to be judged about the fact that you should be eating more fruit and veg. But those fruit and veg and fiber-rich foods will give you calcium for your bones. Magnesium, also helpful for bones and for helping our muscles relax if you get twitchy legs. Potassium for heart health. Antioxidants, generally protection against illness. Whole grains are great. Whole grains help to stabilize our blood sugars along with protein. So again, I'm an advocate of having carbohydrates in our diet. And they give us B vitamins that help release the energy from our foods, because we're usually very, very busy people and we need ways to energize our body. Have some protein, ideally have it at each meal if you can get a little bit, but you don't have to be forking out on expensive supplements. So plant-based, animal-based protein, again, these are the sorts of things that may be discussed at a further level. And just be careful of supplements, because us women are great at self-medicating because we haven't got time to go to the doctors. And I read it on the internet, and Adele told me this thing's really good, so I'm going to try that. Be careful with self-medicating supplements. We kind of get sucked into let's go for the mega dose then because that's better value, and I won't remember to take 3 tablets in a day, but I can do 1. We need to be mindful that as we get older, and it may well be that we're on other medication for blood pressure and diabetes and all those things, that there can be interactions. So always check with a specialist. I know I'm running over time. I'm really sorry. Is that okay? Adele, nod at me. Is that okay?
Yeah, if people need to drop off, then that's fine. It's been recorded anyway, so people need to catch up after. But if you're happy to continue and everyone else is, then yeah, please do.
Super. Okay, lovely. Okay, so let's look at some solutions. We understand this world isn't very forgiving. This can be a tough time. How can we take care of ourselves? So this may come as no surprise. Chuck them. Chuck them out. Hide them under the bed. Put them in the back of the wardrobe somewhere. Bin what isn't helpful. I rarely meet a woman who, and this is coming from me, who used to weigh myself multiple times a day, who kind of looks forward to stepping on that scale. It's trepidation. Like, have I been good? Have I done the right things? And it has this power to determine the rest of your day. So you're either going to have a really crappy day or a great day based on the result of what the scale says, even though that scale tells you nothing about your health. Weight is such a poor indicator of health. If there's any take-home message from this, let it be that. Your weight does not tell you anything about your metabolism. And I come across countless folk in bigger bodies who have brilliant cholesterol levels and blood sugar levels and their blood pressure is fine. So we cannot make that assumption. So chuck them out or wean yourself off them. Explore what works for you. So I encourage some of my clients to do food journaling. This isn't a log. Don't ask people to ever count calories or weigh stuff. I try and help people break away from MyFitnessPal. But to do a food journal with going through menopause can be really helpful in terms of giving you insight and awareness about how you eat and drink, like how often, or how, what's the word of opposite of often? I don't know. How erratic is your eating? Like, do you have the breakfast and then not eat for hours on end? Or do you miss breakfast and then you can't stop eating in the afternoon? We need to kind of look at this bigger picture. So I invite my clients to look at what they eat and drink. I don't need specifics, like loads of detail. What the times, what's more important than what they eat is how they feel about what they're eating and how they're feeling in their body. So I ask, what's going on? So is there a menopause symptom that's bugging you? Is it the frequency of hot flushes? Is it the joint pain in the morning? Is it the anxiety? Is it the mood swings? Whatever it is, the way that I look at them is kind of, well, let's just pick one. If there's one that may have a role where lifestyle and food choices have an effect, let's just explore that one. We don't need to build Rome in a day. So, maybe you can rate or rank that menopause symptoms, like what's it like? So on a scale of 1 to 5, is it a really bad day? And then look at what was happening on that day. Were you stressed? Did you have back-to-back meetings? Did your car break down? Have you got to go and see somebody afterwards? So it's looking at how you're feeling. And we don't really like to get into that touchy feeling because that's all kind of worms that we don't want to go into. But to start to kind of give yourself permission to just notice how you're feeling in your body. But the ultimate question of what do I need? And that can be hard when sometimes you can't identify what you need, or you haven't got the capacity or the time to even think about creating time to meet it. But that's where help can come in. But it is very much an inward out exploration. So it's very personal. What else can you do? Make things easier. I've really had to fight to slow down. I find that incredibly difficult. And so if it is that boring thing of planning your dinners, I don't ask my clients to plan breakfast and lunch. It's like just dinner. If that's the most problematic time, the most problematic or difficult meal, because it's when you get home and you're knackered and you can't be bothered and you haven't been shopping, it's like, just, I don't know, have a bowl of cereal, have beans on toast again, I'll have nothing. So we need to think about, okay, I need to nourish my body. So just plan some dinners. Think about what you might use leftover wise. And again, there's different things that I can advise you around how you do that. And cut corners. Like, really, if buying something ready-made means that you eat rather than not eat, then buy the ready-made. If you can afford it, get the little herb and spice packs or the delivery meal boxes that may come once every 6 weeks. just to give yourself a break. Buy the microwave rice, buy the pre-chopped vegetables or the frozen stuff if you can afford it and if you like those things. I always say to people, the foods to have in your cupboard are the ones that you can afford. They're the ones that you like. They like the taste of, that make you feel good, that satisfy you. So nothing wrong with cutting corners. And there's a big focus about prioritizing our well-being over weight loss. It's letting go of the need to look at weight and use it as a marker of success. It's looking at how you can support and respect your body, because that will lead to an enhancement in the quality of your life. Because taking care of your body, even on the days that you don't particularly like it, allows you to reconnect with it, allows you to appreciate it and look at it from a slightly different perspective. Food isn't everything. Think about your sleep, your stress management, how you take care of yourself. And your self-care is hard. I think self-care is really hard. The stuff that is, this is the stuff that I need to do for me that I feel guilty about. But you are not a DIY project. I know we can kind of look at ourselves as a project, as something to grow and help ourselves, but you're not. Be kind to yourself. And there's so much evidence around when we let go of weight as being this marker of health, and we're then able to kind of embrace the process of how we take care of our body. And we can absolutely change metabolic elements of our body, like blood sugar levels, fat levels, cholesterol levels, stress levels. We can change all of those independent of weight loss. So that's kind of something to leave you with. And when we let go of that weight loss, it raises our self-esteem. That desire to lose weight means that we can find acceptance and appreciation. And it has good effects on our blood glucose levels and cholesterol levels. It gives us hope. So apologies, I've overrun, but I'd just like to sort of open the floor for questions, and I'm happy to stay for as long as people would like to stay now. I really am. And if you would like to carry on the conversation, I am on LinkedIn. Dan has tagged me the last few days in posts. I hang out quite a lot on Instagram. And I do have a non-diet podcast called Cake Over Keto, where I talk more about our relationship with food. And I talk about eating disorders in menopause, but I talk about letting go of losing weight, fear of being full, all those sorts of things. So if you'd like to stay and chat, I would love to carry on the conversation. Thank you very much.
Amazing. Thanks, Mel. I'm just going to stop the recording now, so just bear with me 1 second.